Okay, great. Hopefully you can all see my slides now. So thank you very much to Maria for inviting me to talk today about where immersives fit into my work and their potential roles in archaeological and heritage practice. And I want to talk particularly about where they fit into my wider thinking on how we can and should be intentional in our design of various digital media methods and tools that we use in archaeology and related heritage work, and how I think we need to be very careful with the values, aims, and priorities that we can implicitly bake into the everyday tools and infrastructures through our designs of these media. And these general issues are going to be familiar to many of you, but I think there are some specific issues that are raised by immersives, and I want to share my reflections on these in the context of my own work. So my thinking on the design of immersives has really grown out of collaborative work, picking up on Sarah Kenderdide's comment about collaboration with Sarah Perry, Francesca Dolcetti, and Claire Boardman, all of whom are at York and Mola, Museum of London Archaeology, on how the design of user experiences of diverse digital media and tools both reflects and mediates our aims and objectives and are informed by the context in which we are working, and thinking together about how we can shape our designs of these media to reflect the core values that we want to embed in archaeological and heritage practice. And we all have different foci within this. And my own thinking has really developed out of work across several projects, but notably the Gabii Project, where I've been working since 2009, developing digital workflows and infrastructures in the sense of multi-part tools that are meant to support the basic work of these projects. Basically, I build the digital plumbing. And seeing how subtle changes to the design of these digital medias affected really significant social changes in the work of the team using them. So some of my early work at the Gabii Project was implementing structure from motion, aka photogrammetry, starting in 2009, and really seeing the knock-on effects of the use of this technology over the years, and how what started as a tool motivated by the desire for efficiency, we were speed driven, really led us to reconsider why we make records, how we are trying to communicate our interpretation and use of data to our peers and a wider public, who's given the opportunity to learn different skills, how much labor we were willing to invest in the creation of the record. So a lot of knock-on implications. And similarly, when we introduced direct to live on the web digital recording with tablets, how something that again was driven by efficiency originally really ended up affecting the staff and junior staff and students' sense of responsibility for the record, senior staff attitudes towards training, and reopened all those debates about who gets to create the record and be that authoritative voice. So kind of echoes of issues around the authorized heritage discourse here. And all of this digital infrastructure work led to a project redesigning our publications and really trying to connect how we as archaeologists worked with our digital data to make interpretations, to tell archaeological stories, how we were publishing this data and these stories and making them available. Seeing things like how simple hyperlinking of text could be used to try to break down knowledge silos between teams via integrating specialist reports. So my work at Gabii got me really interested in these wider social and socio-technical implications of how we design interactions with digital media and tools through these different platforms. And so at this point in my own work, I could see in a naive way that how we design these things includes and excludes people in different positions, is more or less intellectually honest about what we know, points towards openness and communication or obfuscation. And this was the start of my mental connection between what's pretty clearly now, I think, in the public discourse, particularly strongly in the context of AI ethics, about the way we design our interactions with digital tech, reflecting and shaping our values, often in quite subtle ways. And so Sarah, Francesca, Claire, and I ran a session at the CAA conference, Computing Applications in Archaeology in 2018, starting to ask some of the questions about this. And really trying to think, okay, so if our value is to try and respect human experience, are we obligated to make our interfaces delightful, something that's enjoyable to use? How can we connect our respect for human effort to making things that are functional and convenient, kind of making tasks good tasks, making our work be something that is not terrible? which is always one of my aims in life. And around this time, I was working with immersives, and my first immersive project happened because I was doing a lot of work with terrestrial laser scanning data and trying to think about how to make this data valuable in an active sense, because like many of my colleagues, I was really frustrated that we were spending lots of money to collect data that mostly sat in the archives for purportedly purposes of digital preservation, but wasn't out there and getting used. I think this is something other speakers are going to pick up today. And I was really interested in how these data could be used to create new knowledge and kind of this nascent sense, again, in my own mind, of preservation by understanding rather than preservation by record. And so this was the first time I encountered really having to explicitly think about value and dilemmas about values that we design into immersives, because immersives make the interpretation of the past more active. I think this is something they're very good at doing and very powerful for. And this means they put people into the past in an active sense, and they're really intended and designed to foreground human experience. And so I was looking at the time at modeling visual attention in representations of past landscapes to try and say something about the experience of them. And because immersive's foreground experience, I think this kind of work really raises a lot of questions as we are designing our work in and with them about if we should be using them to try and persuade people that some aspects of past experience are universal. This is a question on which the jury is still decidedly out. Or if we should be designing our immersive experiences to encourage a sense of presence, or if we need to counterbalance that with a little bit of a whisper of a reminder to suspend belief on occasion. And so there are lots of separate dilemmas around studying how people engage with immersed experiences. There are very deep implications of using present day behavior to inform our interpretations of the past if we're doing things like eye and movement tracking, because of all of the usual issues around representation within the groups we're using to study. So kind of our modern populations involved. So ethical issues related to gathering medically and personally sensitive data about people today, but also I think design assumptions about diversity versus universality in our interpretation of experiences of past places. Separately, I've looked at thinking about using immersives as tools to support interpretation of the present landscape. And so in a separate area, I do a lot of work with airborne LiDAR, airborne laser scanning, and I knew a lot of practitioners had moved their practice to do topographic interpretation of digital terrain models on screen. And so I'd started looking at how we could use the same technology we use to look at the physical landscape and kind of humps and bumps that represent features, how we could do that interpretive work in digital media. And I was at this point really connecting the past two projects to think about the implications for our interpretive practice and looking really at using gesture to indicate what we're seeing in these media. And rethinking how we communicate our interpretation. So can we communicate what we see in the virtual terrain naturalistically through gesture? And this is really a big move away from the hashers that we had seen previously. So I was looking at widely available tools like Tiltbrush to see how I could, again, paralleling work in Gabii, open up the practice of interpretation to involve a wider group in this process. And so we're really looking in both of my immersive projects at technologies that I think empower more people to do and get involved in the interpretation of our representations of the past. And interestingly, with immersives, through Medium, a technology that's really designed to make you feel intimate, to make you feel immersed in the representation, and to incline your brain a little bit to accept your experiences in it as real, not the thing as real, but your experience as a real and meaningful experience. And so I think there's a real ethical dilemma here as we destabilize the balance of valuing expertise and democratizing interpretation and thinking about how we design interfaces to achieve the right balance between those things in the context of immersion and data intimacy. And also thinking again about how we can make these tasks that are satisfying for the people who are carrying them out. And so hopefully these short examples give you a sense of the complicated issues that are involved in ethics and values in the design of media intended to persuade and immerse us, and which really focus on creating human experiences in the present day and therefore thinking about past human experience. And I just want to say that my own reflections on this sit within a much wider conversation about ethics in extended reality. And I wanted to point all of you towards a great conversation that's happening within the IEEE, led by Ken Bai, on the ethics of extended reality. And they are dealing with this enormously complicated landscape of issues. So don't even try to read the slide, all the things that are involved in considerations around the ethics of XR work. And they're asking a lot of questions that I think are really relevant to our thinking. So they say modulating perception and consciousness is a superpower. We are modulating how people perceive the past. We need to be thinking very deeply about this as an issue. How on earth do we ensure that this is a consensual process for people engaging with our representations? They are explicitly asking, I think this is an interesting one, virtual worlds can have public and private spaces. How do we design virtual private spaces to enable those more individual experiences? I think implicitly in a lot of archaeology and heritage work, we're designing for public experience. And again, this is something we really need to be thinking about. They say, be aware of how the stories we tell and the worlds we build shape the future. Man, do we know this, right? In archaeological and heritage practice, how do we build representations of past worlds that shape the kinds of futures we want from an ethical and value-led sense? So in short, I am trying to ask, how do we make it good? How do we make our use of immersives reflect our values and have the benefits that we want our present day communities to have in diverse ways? And so this is, for me, the big challenge in my own work. And so I'm just going to close by saying that we're running a workshop on this in the Immersive Experiences Lab on May 23rd, so on broadly writ ethics of immersives. So if you are interested in this topic, I encourage you to get in touch, sign up for the mailing list, and join us. And I am going to stop there and hand it back to our chair.